Welcome to The Difference. I'm Steve Castile, and today we continue our incredible conversation with John Anderson. So stay tuned. Welcome back. John, I'm so excited that you allowed us to make this two conversations because it was just too rich and too deep and too wonderful just to try to squeeze it into one episode.
Yeah. It's it was pretty intense the last time. We were out on Horn Island.
We were out, you had gone and you had taken your 10-day journey. And as you said, your perspective changed 180 degrees, and you were looking from Horn Island in instead of from land out.
Yeah.
And so today I had said, I want us to take some time. I mean, your dad left an incredible legacy. Your grandmother uh, made sure that legacy was possible. But you yourself are different. You have, as I said in the last episode, kind of become the archaeologist of so much treasure to begin to be able to pull up. I can remember when Anthony went down to the coast and was beginning to do his work on the documentary and was going through the vaults and the the devastation of what Katrina had done to so much treasure, and at the same time, the opportunity had given everybody to rediscover
Mhm.
so much treasure that was right there uh, in plain sight. And as you went on that journey, um, there you begin to kind of carve your special niche in this creative, beautiful place. So talk about the shop that's there because it's such a perfect name for us to jump into this
Yeah.
conversation.
Well, our family shop, um, which is actually a continuation of one of my father's artistic ideas, is called Realizations because that's what he, you know, that's basically what I was describing on Horn Island. I had a realization. I made um, something new, real for me. I looked from a place that I'd never looked from before. And that changed my reality. I incorporated that discovery into my reality. Um, and it's that kind of, um, Daddy had his own vocabulary. Um, you have to remember that he spent 20 years camping in solitude in the wilderness,
Right.
and that he had a series of discoveries. I spent 10 days. He spent 20 years.
Mm.
That's that's a big difference.
It's a big difference,
And
and it takes a long time to translate a,
yeah,
a, a language developed over 20 years.
but he coined terminology. Um, he was not critical of other people because he considered himself fallible and flawed, and so he did not criticize anyone else. But he did want to understand what the differences were. Um, he was a very curious person. And he coined the term dominant mode ashore to describe the way that most people look at life. Most people looked at life from the perspective of the dominant mode ashore.
Wow.
And he looked at life from a different perspective. And in his journals, in the Horn Island logs, at one point he compared and contrasted those two things. And I found myself in my little 10-day journey I found myself, this one quotation that he made kept popping into my head, and I had no idea what it meant, but it just kept popping up. And the quotation was, when speaking of a natural thing, most say, of course, before their senses have a chance to come to their aid with wonder and surprise. They die, and their neighbors and their friends whisper with the wind, of course.
Oh, wow. Not only an artist, but a poet, and indeed a shaman.
And it goes on, the love of bird or shell which might have restored their life to them flies away, carried by the same wind which has destroyed them. So,
Well, just pause a minute and let people marinate in that. What incredibly beautiful words just
mhm,
smithed together in this lyrical song almost.
yeah,
Just beautiful.
he had vision. That experience of wandering in the wilderness in solitude and communing with God gave him a vision in which that was clear
Hmm.
to him. In the next paragraph, he goes on to describe what life looked at from his perspective, the non-dominant mode, from the perspective of looking from nature rather than at nature. And what he wrote was, the bird flies, and in that fraction of a second, man and the bird are real. He is not only a king, he is a man. He is not only a man, he is the only man, and that is the only bird. And every feather, every mark, every part of the pattern of his feathers is real, and he, man, exists.
Wow.
So here I am, a young man sitting on a sand dune under a pine tree on Horn Island, the little bit of shade that you get, um, and wondering if it's possible to see life that way. Why would anyone choose to see it the other way? Why would people choose to say, of course, when they could choose to say yes?
As you're talking, Anthony and I have this ongoing conversation about creation. We're working on a comic book we were doing. He was doing the art. And as I think about this, I think about the garden and I think about the conversation of temptation. That as the serpent comes, Adam and Eve have been walking in this beautiful place in communion as part of the garden. And part of the fall comes when all of a sudden they want to have knowledge that almost extricates them, pulls them out of that kind of coexistence and puts them in a different, on the dominant shore view that they know more than they know. And as you're talking about your dad, I just feel like he stepped back into that essential created place where it's just the garden and God and us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have those moments, as you're talking about, when we are explicitly present and we can see those feathers and we experience the flight and we're in true relationship, then it is a different world.
It's it's kind of, if you don't mind, I'm still gonna
Go ahead.
talk a little bit more about that trip, and I'm gonna uh, violate our premise a little bit and talk about um, religion just a little bit, because before I went out to Horn Island, my mother was very religious, and we attended um, an extraordinary church, St. John's in Ocean Springs, and the people were amazing, and the ritual was beautiful, the church was beautiful, Uh, I think it was designed by Louis Sullivan. Frank Lloyd Wright
Oh, wow.
helped and everything. And I was an acolyte and I sang in the choir. Mom insisted we go to Sunday school. But I had no faith. I was an agnostic. Even in that best of all possible circumstances. I loved the people. I loved the church. I loved my mother, certainly. But when I returned from Horn Island, I can't explain it, but I knew that God existed. God had walked beside me. My father had walked beside me, and God had walked beside me on Horn Island. And there was no longer any doubt in my mind that God existed. And I think that's kind of the definition of faith. Faith is believing in something without any doubt. And it's not something you can do, I think, with your mind. It's something you have to do with your soul.
Exactly.
And I do think it's important to get that out there.
Mm.
I wonder, again, I mentioned and I said that I had been very fortunate. And that was an important part of that good fortune. Because I was not really whole until I had been through that experience. And one other, the birth of my son, made me whole.
Talk about that a little bit.
You want that?
Yes, I do.
My son was born 2 months premature, and I was in the delivery room. And after he was born, his mother, who had not taken any medication or anything until after his birth, suddenly was ready for some kind of medication. So the pediatrician took Josh over to the table and did the Apgar. And then she turned around and she looked at his mother and she looked at me. And she brought him over and handed him to me. And I looked down and it was like looking in the mirror or something. He had no baby fat. He was like 2001 Space Odyssey. And so I bonded immediately, which is not perhaps the norm. But I knew after that experience that I had not been whole, that I had not been complete until that happened. So that's not related to Walter Anderson or anything.
No, I think it's intricately. I mean, as we have these creative conversations, part of the joy of being around different people is that they taste life differently. They see life differently. And there's a fullness and a richness and a depth and a transcendent kind of when I think as a preacher about incarnational, when the word becomes flesh and dwells in us, then life comes alive in us. And that's what happened with your son in that experience was all of a sudden words became real. Life became so present you couldn't hide from it. It was just right there in your arms.
When we first started talking a long time ago, you put your uh, you put your finger on something, and I wanted to go back to that. Um, how I see myself. I do see myself as kind of a translator. Uh, I'm not an artist. I'm not a minister. Um, but I have looked from the normal. I have strived to be normal, and I have looked at artists and ministers from that normal position. And so I kind of think of myself as a translator. I'm a person who is drifting down the river with one foot on one log and another foot on the other foot on another log. I've got one foot in the world of art and one foot in the world of the dominant mode. So I do see myself as kind of a translator. And why is that significant? I know a lot of artists, and I have learned incredible things from artists.
And you lived in a garden of art.
I lived in a garden of artists. But in the course of time, I also realized that I knew something that the artists didn't know. They knew about perspective. They knew the power of perspective. And they knew the value of art, that it made things real, that it created physical evidence, that documented life, that gave them something to look back on and say, that's me. That's who I've been. That's what I've been doing. They know that. What they don't know is that most people don't know that.
Wow.
They don't know. They don't realize. It's so obvious to them. It's so natural for them to know that they can shift their perspective from one thing to another, and that that's incredibly powerful, that they can create, that they can become more like God, that they can defeat destruction with creativity. They know that so intimately that it seems absurd to them that other people would know it. And yet, we live in a world where perhaps the majority of people don't know that.
I'm going to circle back to two of the stories you talked about. Peter creating a canoe for you when you were kids and your experience of going around there, and then you just used that image of feeling like you had your foot in two different boats.
Mm.
And part of the genius and wonder of your life is that very few people have had two boats to put their foot in, and two worlds and perspectives to see for themselves, and to be able to have the gifts to be a translator.
Yeah. It's, if I'm honest, I have to confess that it was nothing I did. My mother was a brilliant woman. She graduated with top honors from Radcliffe, attended classes at Harvard. My father, on the other hand, was the most passionate person that I've ever met. So I think really my mother placed one of my feet in the world of rationality, in the world of the mind, and my father helped place the other foot in the world of art.
So your
So
right and left brain got great stimulation.
I didn't. It's nothing I did.
Yeah.
It's nothing I did. It's something that just uh, a gift of God.
Yeah.
You know, I really believe that God invested a great deal in me, and that I have a responsibility to do something with that.
I love you. I mean, I see your dad's passion in you. When you say I have a responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
we live in a world that's very binary.
Mm-hmm.
That there's so much either orness, and one of the gifts art brings us is this awakening of the duality and the complexity of life. Yeah, there's concrete stuff, and yeah, there's creative stuff, and neither are mutually exclusive. As a matter of fact, when we can bring them together, then we find that abundant life that we're really all looking for. And I feel like you're kind of that tour guide trying to help us get to that place where we can live into the fullness
Mm-hmm.
of having our soul live with our bodies and our creative minds live with our analytical minds in peace.
Mm-hmm. It feels to me like that's a good place to plug Anthony Thaxton a little bit.
There you go. He's shaking his head. He's sitting over there for those of you who are watching the podcast. He had admonished us not to evoke his name.
Yeah,
Go.
we're not supposed to say anything
Exactly.
about Anthony, but he is. He came to me and told me that my father was one of his heroes. And since I've known Anthony, he's become one of my heroes. Um, one of the things about art, one of the ways that you know something is art, is when you start asking yourself, how the hell did, excuse my language, how the hell did they do that?
That's the only way to say it.
You know, whether it's music or art or drama or dance, how the hell did they do that? It can be football.
Right.
That football player flies up into the air, turns 180 degrees, and catches the ball with one hand.
Mm-hmm.
How the hell did he do that? You know, that's art.
I'm almost thinking we got to create a T-shirt there.
And Anthony Thaxton spends almost every day leaping into the air and catching that football with one hand.
He does.
And you and I talked earlier about the way that culture interacts with art. And we both agreed that society would never pay anybody for doing what they like to do.
Exactly. That's just not right.
That society does not want to reward somebody for doing what they really want to do because society feels like they're already being rewarded, and perhaps they are. But I think that there is a place that we can come to a place where society realizes the value
There's the word. Yes.
of that and says, okay, even though they're doing something they really want to do, they're working incredibly hard and they're doing it for other people.
Right.
And we need to support those people.
We do. I think part of the essence of the difference is to awaken people. We highlight folks that work in the nonprofit sector, that give their lives away in service to the least, the last, and the lost. We work in the creative sector because they're the people that give us a perspective that we could never have on our own without their creativity. But what you said is so true. Part of why we do this is because they're undervalued. People don't understand the gift that is nestled there, that they take and maybe savor for a minute. But the word you used was it's creativity is work. It expends energy. It takes an incredible amount of energy to begin to take the perspective you have and try to put it out there in a way that those who don't think like that can grab a hold of it and be affected by it.
Yeah. Well, and also to be creative, we mentioned earlier that we have to look from a place that other people aren't looking from
Mm-hmm.
to see something that they aren't seeing, which means that we're placing ourselves, we're isolating ourselves, or the artist is isolating himself or herself from the normal world. And the normal world doesn't appreciate somebody stepping outside,
Right.
even for a second.
No, and I think that's, you had talked about being a translator, and I think this is a great way for us to wind up the conversation, is that artists have this ability to bring this beauty that your grandmother so much wanted to bring to the world and put it in a language that lets people who watch it go, this is not a photograph, it's not a mirror. This is spiritual. This is from a different place and gives me an image or a word or a phrase or a quote like your dad given, that all of a sudden I can't see things the same way I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people avoid doing that because they're afraid if they look from that place, they won't be able to go back where they were.
Right, because they have to live as your dad, I love that phrase, from that dominant perspective. And part of why we do this show is people don't really want to be different.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very uncomfortable place. But the ironic part is it's a beautifully powerful place.
Right.
It's a beautifully, just liberating place to be able to see things that you've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of this paradox
Yeah.
that we have a hard time living in.
Yeah. I want to go back for just a second to that word perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you look for beauty, you'll find beauty. If you look for ugliness, you'll find ugliness. That's the power of perspective. We have the ability to choose where we're going to look from. Albert Einstein wrote in one of his famous quotes, reality is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one.
Wow.
We create our reality based upon our perspective. And if we are looking for an ugly world, we will create a reality in which the world is ugly. If we're looking for a beautiful world, we will create a reality in which the world is beautiful. So, and Albert Einstein, the greatest realist of all times, tells us that we have the choice, that we can choose. We can choose, if reality is an illusion, then we can choose what our reality will be.
And for me, as I listen to you, that is the mission you've chosen to be on, is to help people see the world in a beautiful way. I want you to, as we close out, share a little bit about your website.
About Anthony's YouTube channel.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
do both.
Anthony has recently created a YouTube channel, and only about a month ago. And nobody knows that it exists except by word of mouth. One person tells a friend, you got to go here, and they go there. And during that 1 month period, 4,200 people have watched Anthony's film about Walter Anderson and loved it. In 1 month. That tells us that people are hungry for something different. They're hungry for a more beautiful world. They're hungry for the physical evidence in Walter Anderson's art that says the world can be a more beautiful place.
They want their own trip to Horn Island.
They want their own trip to Horn Island. Absolutely.
Mm. Well,
Anderson Art is the family's website, WalterAndersonArt.com.
so we've talked about that, and Anthony is saying from the sidelines, WalterAndersonArt.com. Talk about it.
That's just the website that my son created some years ago for our family presence on the internet, and our little shop. My father, as I say, he was doing what his mother wanted him to do, and she wanted him to make art accessible to everyone so that everyone could surround themselves with art. And he came in one day. My mother told me he came in one day. He had been to the place where people bought their home furnishings, and he was very upset. He said that the art that was available to the average person had no integrity, and he was an artist, and it was his responsibility to make art with integrity available to everyone. And so that's when he started creating his block prints, his large block prints. And he went up in the attic, and the shavings of linoleum showered down the stairs. And my mother said she had to go out to the barn and get the shovel that they used for cow
Mucking this
patties
store. Yeah.
to shovel out all these linoleum shavings from the block prints that he had made. And before he was finished, he had about 400 block prints. And he made them deliberately so that he could sell them as inexpensively as possible. He discovered when he was doing, he wanted to work pretty large. He wanted to have pretty large block prints. And he realized that the paper was going to cost too much. And he also realized that people, when they bought wallpaper, at that time most people were covering their walls with wallpaper. And when they bought wallpaper, they bought more than they needed, and then they threw away what was left. So he designed them to go on the back of pieces of wallpaper so that he could sell them for about $1 a foot.
Wow.
And our family, back in 1985, after Daddy had died, decided to continue his concept, making art with integrity available to as many people as possible. Of course, we're not using wallpaper anymore.
Well, I want to close out our session by saying we want to invite people to come down to the store to experience this garden that you grew up in. Tell us how they can get there or how they can visit and really firsthand find themselves experiencing this in person.
Well, it's Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Shearwater Pottery is located off the beaten path, but it's not too hard to find anymore. It's not the same place. Katrina wiped it out and had to be rebuilt. And then the family shop is located in the old railroad depot in Ocean Springs. So it's off-site, but
Well, we hope people will visit that, and we'll put some information on our website. John, I want to thank you so much. I'm going to marinate in this conversation for a long time. So thank you for taking time to share with us. And we hope as you listen that you'll go back and re-listen to this. And there's so much profound that you shared that I think can truly affect people's life, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much, Steve.
It's been our honor. Thank you guys for joining us, and as always, hey, live loved.
You've been listening to The Difference, a presentation of The Hour. The Difference is made in conjunction with and partnership with the Institute for Southern Storytelling at Mississippi College. To find out more about the Institute and ways that we are partnering and mentoring young lives through storytelling, filmmaking, and more, visit us at southernstorytelling.mc.edu. And for more resources from The Hour and from The Difference, check us out at our Hour Stream platform with the streaming content at thehour.org. I'm Anthony Thaxton. Thanks for joining us.